Glad that we decided to watch UFC because this card was fantastic.
Yes, it was. Let's get right to it then. UFC 317. I watched all of the main card with you and some of the undercard. Anything you want to shout out on the undercard?
Yeah, there was a few good performances there. Jacoby Smith, he choked out Nico Price with a rear naked choke in round 2. And he was like calling out the top 10 guys or whatever, maybe slowly roll a little bit there. We don't want to go too far too fast, but he is an exciting prospect. Terrence McKinney did what Terrence McKinney does, and he won in the first 55 seconds of the fight with a guillotine this time. So opening up a submission game. Just going to make him more dangerous. And then also RoboCop, Gregory Rodriguez, round 1 KO over Jack Hermanson, landed a heavy right hand, I believe. And then, Herb Dean was a little too far away, and RoboCop was standing over Hermanson's lifeless corpse for a second, and then landed a very unnecessary, very heavy hammer fist, and Jack was out for some minutes afterwards. And, Megan O'Leary was giving us updates that about what the UFC doctors were saying in the back and how he was okay and they were sending him home. You and I were talking about how they probably should have sent him in an ambulance to the hospital right out of the cage, but we're not doctors. So hopefully Jack's all right.
Yeah, absolutely. I think hopefully take some time off too. That was
definitely you just came back from taking time off, and then you take a brutal knockout. You probably need to take, a year off or so.
I know Greg Rodriguez said that he has no ill will towards Jack, but he also doesn't regret anything. And he said he feels if the tables were turned, he said, I would expect that to be done to me. He said, this is the sport we're in. We go until someone stops. I get that, but it's always just tough to watch, I think.
Yeah, it's not his job to stop the fight. We've seen things where guys just come back to life. If you let up for a second and give the guy an opportunity, comes back to life, and then he beats you and you're getting half your money and you're going down the rankings or whatever. So yeah, that's on Herb Dean. Too far away, too slow, too old. I don't know why people keep calling him the best referee anymore. He's certainly not that. Good luck to Gregory Rodriguez, though. Good luck to anyone who wants to fight that guy. Starting off with Payton Talbott versus Felipe Lima.
Talbott, one of the things they talked about was he was coming off a loss recently, and it was his lack of wrestling that I guess really played into that loss. You wouldn't have known it here. Lima, shot on him a few times. Actually quite a bit, and he was able to get the upper hand on some of the scrambles. He was able to get back up to his feet when necessary. He was able to stop the takedowns. He kept his balance at different times. I mean, this was not a guy I would have known had trouble with wrestling watching this fight. His striking was great too as well. Great, and not necessarily a poor performance by Lima. Just that Payton just was the better fighter on this night. I don't have much to add to this. Usually I like to try to pick somebody for them to fight next. With Payton, he's such an up-and-coming young prospect. I feel like let's just take another unranked fighter, and we'll see where he goes. But a couple more wins, this could be a guy looking at a top 15.
Yeah, obviously still progressing, but vast improvement, like you mentioned, in his wrestling and scrambling, takedown defense from his last fight, which was like just in January, I believe they said. So yeah, exciting prospect. I don't have too much to add. Yeah, I'm with you. Just keep moving him along slowly. Still pretty green, got a lot of work to do, but definitely one to keep an eye on. Possible fight of the year already. Brandon Royval versus Joshua Van.
Yeah, this fight was insanity. I remember us talking about how earlier tonight we were hoping that maybe Kai would pull off the upset in the co-main event. But, obviously we'll talk about that. That didn't happen. But we thought, it would also be cool if Joshua Van won. This was the one we thought for sure wasn't going to happen, because even though Van had so much potential, it being short notice, and Royval just being such a step up in competition, the number one contender. But boy, man, Van is exciting. He's fun to watch. It's an interesting fight, too, when you break it down, because Royval actually landed more significant strikes overall throughout the fight. And I think 2 out of the 3 rounds, too, if I remember correctly. But those were also rounds where sometimes Royval got knocked down towards the end in the last round, and maybe even another one. And I think that's, defined significant strikes, right? I think Royval was the one who was in trouble a few more times in this fight, and that was ultimately the difference here. Great chin by Royval, because he took some great shots. Joshua Van, he took a few solid shots as well throughout the fight, so can't complain about his chin. Takeaway here was high volume punches by both competitors. Just high volume, exciting. This is what you want to see when you see the flyweights. tremendous and a real coming out party, real star making performance for Joshua Van, who now is catapulted. And, the fight next is for the championship. We're going to see it later. Obviously, he stepped in the ring, the octagon later to have the face off. UFC already capitalizing on the buzz that this guy had that night. Smart on them. And you can't help but root for this kid.
Yeah, basically, it was like you said, Van just landed the more impactful shots, but, Royval just kept coming. He was really trying to make a statement with this, and Van just put up a great fight. So lots of combinations from Royval. He kept coming forward, even though you mentioned he got knocked down a couple times. He was taking big shots. I believe Dana said these guys were third or
third
were
overall.
for most significant strikes. They broke into the top 10 just in the first 2 rounds. They broke the record for the division for most significant strikes. So both very good showing from both guys. It was very close. I wouldn't have wanted to be a judge. It was close. And Dana decided he was going to pay Royval his win money as well. He said he earned it. So that's great for him. It's a bummer for him because he's lost to all the guys up at the top. So he's going to have to keep taking these fights against these guys coming up and really string together some wins to get another title shot.
I mean, have him and Kai fought? That might be a fight to make, actually, on that end.
Yeah, maybe. I'm not sure. I don't remember. Yeah. But yeah, Van looked great. I mean, he's only been training for 5 years or something like that. He's 23 years old, but he's just a phenom. I do think Pantoja is going to be a tough ask for him, but
if we thought Royval was a tough ass, Pantoja is just another level. But we have time in between the fight. If Van is making this kind of improvements already, we'll see.
Yeah, Beneil Dariush versus Renato Moicano.
Very competitive fight as well. More on the slower side at times. Different one. It had its exciting moments. This was where we maybe got a few boos from the crowd once in a while with some of the ground fighting. But I think that was coming off the Joshua Van Royval fight. These guys had a tough ass coming up for that. I thought the crowd was a little impatient here at times. Dariush, a little better on the ground, I would say. Moicano, was excellent, but Dariush a little bit on the ground. And Dariush a little bit better on the feet. Kind of what I was saying last week. I felt like these guys are both good everywhere, but Dariush is just a little bit better everywhere. That being said, I thought Moicano was in the fight the whole time, and I thought that, when we got to the decision, I felt pretty confident Dariush had won, but, it was an interesting fight. Dariush, next fight, I'm sure he wouldn't want this. It's probably, he's getting older. He doesn't probably want to fight backwards, but a fight I personally would like to see, Rafael Fiziev. I feel Fiziev is, a fun striker, and he could use a guy like Dariush, to fight right now, who's going to present problems everywhere, but I think it's also a winnable fight for him. A fight he could lose, but go either way. And maybe it's a good fight for Dariush in some ways because we need to see another fight like this. And if Dariush wins that, all right, maybe back in that, you're fighting a Justin Gaethje or, somebody like that.
Yeah, I think that'd be a fun fight. I think, Dariush obviously on the ground is much, much better than Fiziev, but, Fiziev much, much better on the feet. So that'd be fun. But yeah, back to this one with Moicano. I think, we know that Moicano is a great jiu-jitsu guy, and a lot of these guys have great grappling, but I think a lot of them are great on top. When they're the ones that's controlling where the fight is and not, necessarily have a great guard. Like Charles Oliveira has a great guard, very dangerous from his back. But most guys, it's, when they're smothering you is when, they have this great grappling game. So Dariush was just able to be the one that was on top, I think. So, it was a close fight, like you said, but that's ultimately what he came down to, just him getting top pressure. So good on him. Moicano will be back. Neither guy is young, but both of them have some fun fights left for sure.
Yes.
Co-main event, which we have alluded to, Alexandre Pantoja versus Kai Kara France.
Pantoja, man, as much as we talked about Joshua Van with a star-making performance earlier, Pantoja is just the real deal. He's a fun, exciting fighter. He gets the job done. He's dominant and he's great everywhere. He wants to chase Mighty Mouse in those records, but he still has a long way to go because Mighty Mouse was so great. He could get there. However, I have to say it's kind of a bummer because I think we talked about this that night. It's almost at the expense of the excitement of the division, which was kind of where Mighty Mouse was at a point, right? You like Mighty Mouse, but it was like they're so dominant that if you want to see a competitive division in the sense that you have matchups where I don't know who's going to win, there's very few of those right now. We're hanging our head on this Joshua Van kid thinking man, you're only 23 years old, but we hope you can do this because we want to see, exciting matchups. We shall see. Obviously, Van is the next fight to make. They've already faced off, like I said. But this was just another great performance by Pantoja, who was awesome on the feet, and specifically in this fight, really on the ground, because obviously Kai is somebody who would have probably been able to bang with him, but he had already took him down early, and he was able to have success on the feet as well, because in that short period of time, you could see Kai was worried about getting taken down again. And and then really had no answer. And then ultimately got his back taken. Poor Kai got choked out. And impressive performance by Pantoja. Looking forward to his fight with Van.
Yeah, bummer for Kai. He goes back in the line again. The division is pretty much set. It's definitely dying at this point. There's not a lot of exciting stuff. Van being maybe the exception currently. You alluded to the Mighty Mouse days. Yes, very similar to that. So at least Pantoja is getting finishes. That helps keep things exciting for sure. Yeah, I don't know what else to add. It's just, if Van can't do it, we're just going to start cycling guys again. So he's got I don't know how many title defenses he has, but I know he's still maybe halfway to Mighty Mouse's like 12 or something like that. So still got a long way to go. Main event, which sent me home sad. Ilia Topuria versus Charles Bronx Oliveira.
I watched an interview Ilia did right before the fight, like I think 5 days later, clips of it, where he talked about how he was going to win, how Charles was going to go down in the first 2 minutes, and he explained why. That other fighters, like a Max, he didn't specifically say, it takes him getting their distance. They try to, run or do this. He said Charles is going to go straight for him. And he said that's going to play. He was dead right. And we talked about it last week. The one thing with the weight thing is we wonder if the power would translate. We figured it probably would, but we had to see it. We saw it. It translated. And now we have a guy that, God, he's young as well, right? In his 20s still?
I think he's 29.
29, so in his late 20s, maybe 30s, but still undefeated, 2 weight class champions, and is coming off knockout wins over Volk, Holloway, and Charles Oliveira now. So, I mean, yeah, it's an impressive Hall of Fame career he's kind of already had. Like, if his career ended tomorrow, this guy is a Hall of Famer. We'll see what's next. I like all the potential matchups with this guy. Unlike, Pantoja fight, like this guy, you could put him in there. Obviously, Pimblett is the guy that came out. We could talk about that. Dana has backtracked on that. He said that wasn't supposed to happen. I think he wants to see Patty get another win, kind of like we talked about last week. And if that happens, cool. I'd like to make that fight. It was interesting to hear Dana say this. It's kind of funny because, Dana's all about making money, but I do think there's a part of Dana that he wants to really make sure, hey, we're not entertainment. We're not this. I think it's almost like there's a certain insecurity about the old days where you were compared to WWE because no one knew what you were. Like he just like, I don't care if it was entertaining. I think they like the face-offs, but they like it when it's a top contender versus the top contender. But it's also a little weird because this fight would be huge money, this Patty Pimblett fight. But Justin Gaethje would be a great matchup. And God, Chevy, I'm blanking out on the option. Arman Tsarukyan, the number 1 contender, the guy who's probably the most skilled for the fight. But that being said, I do want to point this out. Charles had a real competitive fight with Tsarukyan. Tsarukyan won that, but it was super competitive. I know some people thought Charles may even have won that fight. So stylistically, you might be thinking Ilia would win that. I think Ilia wins all these fights, but perhaps the most intriguing fight could be Patty because Patty has gotten so big. Patty likes to wrestle, and Patty makes improvements, and we haven't seen Patty fight that level of competition. Chandler being the toughest guy he's fought. But I don't know. What do you want to see, I guess, next? Or your breakdown of the fight, and what do you want to see next?
I mean, there's not a lot of the fight to break down. Yeah, Charles walked forward. He does what he always did. He got caught early, and Ilia hit him so hard he didn't have the opportunity to recover, and he got put out. Yeah, as far as matchups, I don't know. Dana said Patty wasn't going to be the guy. Somebody mentioned that Gaethje was going to retire if he didn't get the shot, and Dana said that's silly. So it didn't sound like he was too thrilled about Gaethje getting the shot. And he said Arman's not getting the shot. Arman weighed in as a backup fighter for this fight, and he was like, that's a step in the right direction. So I don't know who the fuck is going to fight Topuria, but yeah, it's going to be whoever. I got to tell you, I never wanted to see the Makhachev fight more. at this point. I know that that's not what's next, but we could see it in the future, whether it's at 170, at 155, whatever. I'm not sure. I'm kind of with you. I'm not sure who's gonna beat Ilia at this point. He looks pretty invincible. I know in the come up, he had some struggles. He struggled with, Bryce Mitchell gave him fits, wrestling wise and everything. Probably gave him his toughest fight in the UFC. So
was it Jai Herbert or something that rocked him at one point too?
Jai Herbert, yeah, that was his one fight at 155 before that, which I think was his like UFC debut or something. So he's had some tough fights, but he just keeps getting better. And he has this unshakable confidence. And, with each win and each brutal knockout he's getting over our favorite fighters here, that confidence is growing. So, I'm excited to see who he's going to fight next for sure.
I'll pitch a wild scenario for you, and then I'll tell you what I think is going to actually happen. Wild scenario is Dustin Poirier beats Max Holloway in his retirement fight, and it doesn't end up being his retirement fight because they like the idea of Poirier fighting for the championship. Because if you're not doing Armin, you're not doing Justin, you're not doing Patty, and Islam's not coming back down. And I don't think they want to do a Holloway fight, being he had just knocked him out. And what are you thinking? That's the only reason why that even entered my mind when you were talking. I don't see that happening, but I'm going to throw that out as a wild card. I think they give it to Armin. I think Armin will be the guy that fights. And I'm going to say Justin doesn't retire. They're going to tell Justin, you win one fight, you get the title shot no matter what, because Armin or Ilia is a fresh matchup. But that fight he's going to have to win is going to be against Patty.
I can't remember if it was like Hamza or somebody. I saw a video today where one of those guys leaked that fight was going to be a co-main event on some upcoming card. Justin and Patty, yeah. So
man, I'll tell you, I'm excited for that fucking fight too, because the trash talk, but also just the styles of the way they both like to fight.
That's going to be a wild 1 minute before one of them gets knocked out.
Yeah. Patty's a sorcerer.
I do got to tell you, though, Gaethje, if Patty gets him down, Patty's going to choke him out for sure. So
I agree. I definitely think that's likely what's going to happen.
And he's huge, so I can picture him getting him down,
But I also think Patty's, I don't get knocked out. Like, we've seen Patty caught. And Gaethje is a dangerous guy to play that game with. So I think it's a very interesting fight, and I think it's the right fight to make. I think those are the two that should fight, and I think the winner of that should fight the winner of Armin and Ilia. I think you give Islam the shot against Jack Del Manlena. And I think if Islam wins that, whatever, Islam's got welterweights to fight, whether it's Usman or whatever. And I think Ilia is going to have to win a few times before he goes up to welterweight. I know I saw in a different interview with him again today in preparation for all this. And Ilia said the UFC already asked him, don't say you're going to fight for the welterweight title after this. He says,
there's lots of good fights at lightweight. So I also wouldn't be mad I would be very sad if Dustin knocks out. I'm going to be sad either way. But if Dustin has some great showing, knocks out Max, beats him for a third time, and then he's like, fuck it, I'm not going anywhere. I want Ilia. And they decided to give that to him. I could see that being very fun. But you mentioned Dana wanting to get away from that, like just being sports entertainment. Well, Demetrius Johnson, DJ kind of called the UFC out for that, recently saying so. He said if you really cared, Armin would be number one, even though Dana said he's not going to be next. He's like, he's earned the shot. Yeah, he pulled out. He had an injury or an issue with his back or whatever. Like, you can't punish the guy forever. He's next in line. So if you do anyone else, it's just a reality show. It's not a sport.
And the thing about it is you have so many contenders potentially there, whether it's Justin, whether it's Patty, whether it is Dustin for one more fight, whether it's Max. You have all these guys who could potentially weigh in as backup fighters. They would kill for that. So right now, lightweight is at an exciting period again, as far as I'm concerned.
Another still has a few fights to go, but Mauricio Rufy is an interesting matchup a couple fights from now if Ilia holds on to that title. That one I'm very excited to see. Two Conor McGregor regens fucking fighting against each other.
For Du Bronx, this is still one of the all-time greats. I wonder what he does next, possibly. Actually, even though he's coming off a loss, I'll paint this fight here. This is probably the most matchmaking we've ever done. We're kind of carrying the show, but it was such an exciting time. Even though he's coming off a loss, if Max Holloway does get the win against Dustin Poirier and keeps that BMF title, Max Holloway and Charles Oliveira do Bronx for BMF title, I got no problem with that in the meantime while we're trying to build contenders up here.
Both guys much different fighters than when they fought at 145 for sure. Big difference.
Absolutely.
Years and years ago now. So
yeah, going either way.
Yeah, that'd be a fun fight.